All right, so here's our video on measures of center, and we're going to be talking about mean, median, and mode. So first, let's start with what is the measure of center. So a measure of center is going to be anything that describes the typical value of a set of data points. So when we have data points that range in value, if we want to know kind of the center area or the measure as near the center as possible, we would use one of these measures of center. Mean, median, and mode are all different examples or different ways to find the measures of center. So in other words, if I gave a test to my students and I have 100 students and I have all the scores for all the students on the test, and I'm wondering, well, how did they do? How did my kids do on that last test? It's going to be really tough for me to tell when I have 100 grades that I'm just looking at them all together. So instead, we use things like median, mean, and mode to get a better idea of a typical value of my tests. So instead of 100 numbers, I may have a mean that's like 85%. That's going to give me the average, okay? So that gives me a better idea of how many kids did well and where the average grade is. So that's what measure of center are. They're going to be talking about taking a set of data, finding a typical value somewhere in the middle to find a better understanding of the data. So let's go ahead and look at example number 1. All right, so let's look at example 1. The question here says, what is the mean number of text messages that were sent? So here we're looking for the mean number. Mean is the same thing as average. So most often in real life, when you hear anyone asking you to find the mean of something, it's typically referred to as average. So when we're finding average or mean of a group of data, we want to first find the sum. So we're going to find the sum of the data. So let's do that first. I always recommend ordering all of your data in order from least to greatest, whether you're finding mean, median, mode, range, whatever it is. Just get in the habit of always listing your data in numerical order from least to greatest. So I'm going to do that real quick first. All right, so I have 7 pieces of data. Those are all ordered in numerical order. So now I'm going to find the sum of those. I'm going to add them all up. So 82 plus 90 plus 95 plus 101 plus 108 plus 120 plus 125 is going to give me a total of 721 texts. So there were 721 text messages sent. The last step to find your mean or your average is we're going to divide by the number of pieces of data. So when I look at my data, I have 7 pieces of data. There are 7 different people that we've counted their text messages. So I'm going to take the total number of text messages and divide it by how many pieces of data that I have. So down here, that's going to give me 721 texts divided by 7 people that were making those text messages. If we were doing it longhand, we would have 721 divided by 7. So that's going to leave me with a total of 103 text messages as the average number of texts that were sent. So example 2 here, we're looking at some new information, some new data, and there's 3 parts here that we're going to do. So let's get started. So the first question is asking us to identify the outlier. So I just want to make sure you understand what an outlier is. So an outlier is going to be a piece of data that's much less or much more than the rest of the data. So if you look at our data here on heights of ponies and inches, you'll see 10 pieces of data here, and we are going to be needing to determine which of those heights would be considered an outlier, which one is much more or much less than the others. So the easiest way to identify this would be to put it into a dot plot, but we're not there yet. So first we're just going to order these from least to greatest to see if we can then identify our outlier. So I'm going to start by ordering these from least to greatest. So I have 28, 37, 37. I should have two 40s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so when I look at my data here, I can see that I start at 28 and then I jump up to 37. Then everything is within just a few inches of each other, from 37 ranging up to 42. And 42 isn't much higher than the next lowest, which is 40. So my outlier here is definitely going to be 28 as my outlier, because it's much less than all of the other heights. So now that we have our outlier, part B tells us to just find the mean. So to find the mean, first we're going to find the sum of our data. So I need to add up all of my data pieces. So I'm going to get a total of 379 when I add up all of my pony heights. That's our first step. Second step, divide by number of pieces of data. So I see that I have 10 different pony heights here, so I have 10 pieces of data. So that's going to give me 379 divided by 10. So that's going to give me 37.9, and that's going to be in inches. So the average pony height of our data would be 37 9/10 inches. Then we get to C, where we need to find the mean without the outlier. So now we're finding the mean of everything minus my outlier, which was 28. So now I'm going to first find the sum. I know that my sum of all my data was 379. Since I'm taking out 28, I'm just going to start with that sum and take out 78, which is going to give me 351 inches is my total sum of all my data. Second, I need to divide. So I do not have 10 pieces of data any longer. I've taken out one of them. So I still have 9 when I took out the outlier. So I have 351 divided by 9 is going to give me 39 inches of my mean or my average pony height. So I want to make sure that you can see the difference here. When we have data that has a true outlier, do you see if we include the outlier, being that our outlier was less than the rest of the data, it actually pulled down our average and made it lower. When I took out that one outlier, it gave me a more true mean of what my average height would be of my ponies. So it does make a difference. I want you to keep that in mind as we move forward, talking about mean, median, and mode, and how and when we would use each specific measure of center. So this top number here was with the outlier included, which our outlier was pretty significantly less than the rest of the pony heights. And then C down here is giving us the mean without without the outlier included. So we only used 9 pieces of data that were all closely related. For example 3, now we're being asked to find the median and the mode. We're given some bowling scores here, and we need to determine what the mode is and what the median is. So let's first start by defining median and mode. So the median of something is always going to be the value in the middle. So I always think of median as, maybe not because you guys don't drive, but for me, I always remember median as the middle, because when you're driving down the road, you call the middle of the road where like the trees or the concrete or whatever it is in between the 2 or the 4 lanes, those are then called the median, right in the middle. So we've got median, and then if we're finding mode, that's when we're talking about the value that shows up, that appears the most. And I always remembered that one because mode kind of is like most. So I'm going to go ahead and explain and solve for these. The very first thing that we want to do, which is what we always do, is put our data in order. So let me do that. Okay, so now that I have my data in order down here in pink, let's down in pink, we are going to find the median value. Usually median is easy if you have median would be easy if you had an odd number. So an odd number of data sets, because that would give you a true middle. So what I mean by that is if I'm looking at my hand, right? I have 5 fingers, and we all have a middle finger if you have 5 fingers. And that is because I have 2 on the left and 2 on the right, which leaves me with 1 in the middle. If I had 6 fingers, I would no longer have a true middle. I would have 3 and 3, which is what we're going to do here. If you have an odd number, no matter if it's 5, 9, 13, whatever it is, any odd number of data sets, you're always going to have a true middle for your median, which makes it easy. In situations where you have an even number of data pieces, you will not have a true middle. You will then find the middle values, the 2 of them that fall right in the middle, and you will then find the average or the mean of those 2. So that's what we're going to do here. To find our true middle, here's my data here. I have my 10 data points. I'm going to start by crossing off the lowest and the highest, and then again, the lowest and the next highest. I will keep going until I'm left with the 2 in the middle. If I had an odd number of pieces of data, I would be crossing off and I would end up with only 1 number circled in the middle. Now that I have these 2 in the middle, I need to find the average of those to find out what would actually fall right in the middle here. I have 10 pieces of data. I want to find out what would be right here. What would be the 6th number that would come before 145? And that would be the average. So to find the mean or the average, I need to find the sum of those 2 numbers. So I'm going to add 135 and 145 together. Let's see, 130. And my calculator's not working. So 135 plus 145, that's going to give me 280 divided by 2 pieces of data. That's going to give me 140 will be my true median. Okay, Then finally, I'm going to be looking for mode. Mode is going to be the value that appears the most in my data set. Your data sets could have one mode. They could have more than one mode. If I had more than one number here that showed up the most, then like for example, right now the one that shows up the most is 160. If I had two scores that were 90, then I would have a bimodal set of data and I would have two modes. I could also have no mode at all. If all of my scores were represented just one time here, like if 160 was not repeated, if that number was 180, let's say, I would have no mode of this data because there would be nothing repeated. In this case, 160 is repeated the most. So 160 will be my mode here. Okay. So we have median right in the middle. Mode is the one that's repeated the most. Well, there you have it. That's it for our lesson on measures of center. Please make sure you ask Ms. Napierata if you have any questions or you're not sure how to find either mean, median, and mode. Thanks.